All right, guys. Welcome to today's episode of Kimchi Kids podcast. Today, I'm very, very excited to introduce a very talented guest. She is an artist, a chef, an entrepreneur, a pioneer, a trailblazer. Her resume includes some highly esteemed restaurants here in Chicago, such as Nico Osteria, Avec, and Blackbird. She is also former chef and owner of Snaggletooth, and also the neighborhood gem Passerotto in Andersonville. She got Eater Chicago Chef of the Year. She's a recipient of the Michelin Bib Gourmand, semi-finalist for the 2019 James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant, and now she is currently working on the incredible Economy, which is local to Chicago and whose mission is focused on community sovereignty and mutual aid, a people-focused economy, and micro business support. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, welcome to the show, Jennifer Kim.
Hi.
All right, Jennifer, welcome. So before I just wanted to jump, maybe we can go straight into your background a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
I guess so we want to start and just find out what was that exact moment that you decided that you want to be in the kitchen?
I don't know if there was an exact moment. So growing up, I grew up in a household that didn't have a lot of cooking. Like both my parents worked, they worked late into the night. So really it was just me and my brother after we'd come home from school. So a lot of the food that we would eat are really easy things like microwave meals. We messed with a lot of Chef Boyardee, things that are like frozen and you could just put in. I mean, like, I know how to work a microwave. That is not a joke. But like food and cooking was more just for like celebrations or big gatherings. And that's where, folks would come in and actually cook. So really throughout most of my life, I didn't really see cooking as anything other than like an event, right? It was for something. I think I sort of found cooking, it was just through trying different things. After I graduated from high school, I went directly to college, to UIC to study pharmacy, and knew within like the first month, I was like, oh no, like this is not what I want to do. Like,
how long did you stick with that?
For a year.
Yeah,
and then I was like,
a Korean American go to UIC for pharmacy. That's something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just did exactly what my parents, wanted me to do, which is something that I think a lot of, children of immigrants can relate to because, hey, your parents come here in the pursuit of a very specific American dream, which also extends to their children without thinking my American dream looks very different than my children's definition of the American dream. So I ended up dropping out of college. My parents were not happy about that. That caused a little bit of a rift. So throughout my 20s, I just sort of did what kids in the early 20s do, which is just party, go out. I lived in a suburb of Chicago, and my mom is very religious. So grew up in a very strict household. I also went to a Southern Baptist high school, which was a whole experience, and that just deserves its own completely separate chapter that we won't get into. So I grew up very limited in my experiences of what the wider world looked like. So going to UIC, that was I was like, what the hell's going on here, right? And also it's like, oh my God, there's so much to see and experience out here. And party, right? I'm like, what is this? This is kind of fun. So, I just partied and I started working just retail jobs to help me kind of, get on my feet and figure out what it means to be on my own. Because at this point, my parents were like, we want nothing to do with this. Unless you go to college, goodbye.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot actually through retail because just about how numbers work and how to read P&Ls and just kind of how to connect with people because again, very limited experience growing up of talking to people from, Oh, sorry. This is very creepy.
That was.
One of the curtains fell off our window.
Yeah, there you go.
A beam of light, which Andrew is just sitting in, like Madonna. I love it.
Are we pausing?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm actually really interested in the retail journey of your career because one, I never thought that. I feel like I generalize and just assume most chefs are kind of going through this like normal system.
Yeah.
So where was it that you worked retail and like, or at least maybe there was a few, but maybe one that stood out the most that helped you grow as much?
So like the first retail job I ever had was, remember US Cellular?
Oh,
that was a thing. Like
I worked at WPI.
I did too.
Oh my
Get the fuck out of here,
yes.
Thomas. I'm sure we all shared a room like
so
on
crazy.
Elston. Where the unique thrift store, it's like across from the unique thrift store.
Yeah, and the corporate headquarters was up in Northbrook, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I ever drove all the way out
interesting.
there, but
That
was like my
crazy.
first ever retail job. And I was like, what am I doing? Like I have to talk to people.
Yeah,
and then
I
I was
don't-
like, oh, like it's like a play, right? You
Yeah.
just like put on this persona and
Exact-
like suddenly it's like,
It was nurturing my front of house, that salesmanship.
yeah, I never thought like I had the capabilities to do a lot of the things that I learned, but like it just like working retail, just like everyone should work at least one retail job.
Yeah.
Like everyone should work a restaurant job to like fully understand like what it entails to
That's a great
do those
point.
jobs.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, like people look down on like retail jobs because they're like, it's a retail job, like it's a minimum wage job. But like the skill sets that you learn from there are so translatable in so many
In real
other
life.
settings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, so I was a busboy and then a server before I started in the kitchen, and that's where I realized that I can't talk to people. It's like the
And now you're hosting a podcast.
yeah, but this is different. There's a script here.
Yeah. It's okay. Like you're facing it head on and being like, okay.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, like but I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
the whole service thing. It's just I do it differently. Like our conversation with Kevin, the other few months ago, where it's just like, oh my god, yeah. So he said like he loves hospitality, but he doesn't like the front of house thing either.
Yeah.
And the way that he shows his hospitality is through a plate of food.
Yeah.
You know, and like it just like resonated with me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That's totally how I show people that you know I want to serve. You know.
Yeah, not all storytelling is verbal. You know, there's like so many other mediums that you're able to like connect with people.
For sure.
And like that's what you're kind of figuring out like through, especially like in your teens and 20s, is just like, who are you as a person?
Right.
And like sometimes you'll never have the answer, but like that's also totally fine. You know, like I feel like everything is so goal oriented nowadays. It's like you have to have an end goal. Like what is the purpose of like embarking on this journey? And it's just like, I don't know, just fucking enjoy the ride, dude. Just calm down. Like it's
For
totally
sure.
fine.
That's such a that's so huge. It's like just relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the ride, you know.
Yeah.
I get that too. I think as we're going through this and like we have our peaks and valleys, you know, as we work together and like just learn how intense this shit can be.
Do they need help out there?
No, it's just Chuck.
No, Chuck.
Okay.
He's just playing games.
Chuck's just wrestling.
With this giant piece of cardboard and being like, why is no one coming out and helping me? And you're just like,
Frustrated out there. Oh no, he's got it, man. Chuck's an amazing Renaissance man, dude. Look at what he did with this room. It just made it beautiful overnight.
Yeah.
But that's so funny that you were at WPI. I still remember. I one of my best months. I like closed 66 agreements. It was like, and then I got a huge bonus check from Andrew, the owner. I was just like, yeah.
He was like so scary because like
He
he's
was.
like every Korean dad where like he has like no expression on his face. And he
Yes.
just sits there and he's like, just like,
Yeah.
what? Tell me.
I also got fired from that job.
Was it Korean?
Oh.
Yeah, there was. I was like, I closed the shop up and went to go just smoke. And I came back blasted, and I was like, I couldn't even like look the dude in the face. I was so like, I was so high. I was like, and it was like one of the junior guys was like, "What's going on, dude? Like, why'd you close the shop?" And I was just like, I was like, dude, I can't even have this conversation right now. He's like, dude, we're done here. I'm like,
Okay.
and then Dean Hart was still waiting for me outside. So I was like, David, I'm coming out. Pick me up. Yeah. It was like, such a weird point in my life where I felt like it was such a cool learning step to like learn how to like just trial and error on like how to that didn't work, right? And then how do I adjust like my pitch a little bit, and just, but I really did learn a lot just like trying to sell phones, and you're like selling this contract for, I think it was like
2 years.
Those days, right? You were committed to 24 months on a phone bill.
Yeah.
So it was like a big deal. And like sometimes they'd be like, all right, we'll come back with the family and think about it. And I'm just like, come on by. Like, make sure you come on Wednesday when I'm here.
I'm here. Yeah.
I'll get that contract set up for you.
Commission.
That's crazy.
Oh, great times though. All right, we're just gonna roll, Daniel.
Let's hold for about 5 more minutes.
We're holding.
Yeah. Hold it. Hold strong.
Hold. But yeah, that was definitely interesting. So I was like I moved all around for those guys. Like I went up to Lincolnshire, to Randhurst, to like,
I took over the Randhurst store maybe after.
No way.
I don't know.
That's so crazy.
I was in Randhurst Mall. I was in not Northbrook,
funny.
Vernon Hills.
Yeah.
I was at the Elston.
Oh my god, I was at Vernon Hills. That's where I was.
Maybe after they fired you, they're like, "Come on." I was like, "Me, me."
You don't have to try really hard to be better than the last guy.
No.
Just don't close the store to go smoke weed.
Mid-ship. Close it.
Oh
my
man.
gosh.
Yeah, those are some like so Dennis Park, Alex Sim, all those. I don't know if they were all at the company, and like I grew up with those guys, and we're just punks. So.
Yeah.
All right, we're rolling. Cool.
Good. Do we want that door closed?
Why not?
Do it.
Chuck, you good?
I'm good, yeah. Great.
Got a workout out there. I love it.
I was like, halfway through, I was like, oh yeah, they could probably hear me going, fucking me. I have a relationship with insulation foam that's tenuous at best. But yeah, we're good.
So growing up, it's interesting that food wasn't a big part of the dinner table at home. But what was that, like maybe it was like, what was that aha moment where you're just kind of like, there's something about this that I really love to do and I want to explore this. Like, was there a moment?
So my dad would occasionally like mail me these info tapes, like VHS, like this is back in the day of like VHS. And it would be for like these, like, he's like, oh, this sounds like a really interesting job that you should maybe like go to school for or get accredited for. So it's like, what was it, like real estate or being an auditor or being a technician of some sort. And he sent me the Le Cordon Bleu Chicago VHS, like the info tape. And I was like, really? Like, this is something that you'd be like cool with me doing?
Oh, wow.
And he's like, I don't know, just pick a job, please. He's like, you can't just like live your life like this. And I was like, okay, I guess. Just because, again, like, they didn't look at retail as like a credible career. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they were like, no, like, this is like, it's cool for you to do this in the early 20s, but like, it's time for you to get like, quote unquote, a job.
Right.
So I was like, all right, like, let's look into culinary school, I guess, because like I definitely don't want to be like a real estate agent or an auditor or any of the other jobs that he kind of was suggesting. And I knew that I didn't want to go get a degree. So, looking around at the different culinary schools, I went to Kendall and kind of looked around. And I think, seeing like the different classes that they had available. And I went when classes were actually live. Okay. So, I got to see like, hey, like this is kind of like how a kitchen works and this is how the classes work. And like just something about that felt like, okay, like I can imagine myself doing this. And I think this is something that like within my skill sets that I would actually really enjoy. So I ended up just talking to one of the advisors and like enrolled for whatever the next semester was, which was like a month or two away. And then
you had never worked in a restaurant. You never
No.
Before this.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was a change.
I feel like that is I feel like culinary school should almost encourage people to be like, hey, we'll give you a credit or two. I don't know how the college thing works, but like, hey, we'll give you credit, but you got to go do 6 months as like a host or a, busser or like a prep cook. Just to be like, I want you to see what this world is like. I just feel like that would be incredible for them to encourage people to try that.
Yeah. And like they do have internships where, which is how I got connected into Blackbird.
Right.
was where I was like, oh, like I, for sure, this is where I want to do my internship. So like I was just working towards that for the first 6 months of culinary school.
Was it Posey?
It was, David Posey had I think for the first few months, had taken over from Sheeran. Yeah. And I was just like really loved like the aesthetic of the food and also just, I don't know, just like the kitchen, the staffing, things like that. So that was kind of like what I was working towards.
And for listeners, David Posey is now he's the current chef and owner of the restaurant Elska, which is located off Randolph. It's a beautiful restaurant. Yeah. Him and his wife are doing some incredible food over there. I want to touch back on what you just said because I think it's interesting for people that maybe are outside of the Korean culture, like what you were talking about with your dad giving you a little bit of pressure, and I'm like kind of laughing in my head about imagining these like stack of VHS tapes, like you come home from like into your room and you see the stack of like promotional VHS videos. But in Korea, like there is this culture that still exists today, but they call it orobai, right? Which is like, that's like your part-time job. And after you reach 25 in Korea, right? And this is like what our parents are like more accustomed to. Once you get to like 25, they will like to keep that job, like unless you've earned it in that short time that you're like excelling as a part-time employee, they won't, it's very difficult to get a career after that point, right? So I know that it's a big deal that there's a kind of like this age buffer in Korea, and I'm sure that our parents kind of like relating to that, that kind of pressure existed at home for you. So was there a person, was it maybe at culinary school that played a significant role in like your profession that really kind of helped mold you, or was it through your career maybe?
I think it was a little bit of both. So it was really interesting because for the longest time, like after I dropped out of UIC, I was like, I'm just not good at school. Like throughout high school, I was a great student, but like it was very regimented. It was, like very structured. So it's like, I know exactly what to do at what time and like when it's due. But like college is sort of like, that's when you're figuring out like how to manage yourself, right? And like at college, I was like, I cannot manage myself. Like I am the worst self-manager possible. Which also kind of led to me just being like, I'm not into school. Like maybe I'm just not smart. Like I don't know what it is about like being in college. I was like, ooh, this is not for me. So I was like really nervous going back into like Kendall College because like in addition to culinary classes, you still have to take all of like your other general education, so like your math, your English, things like that, because it is an associate's degree.
I didn't know that.
So I was like, oh shit, like am I going to be able to do this? Like am I going to drop out of culinary school too? Yeah. And like it's so expensive, So I was just really worried, and I think it was just like the point in my life, right? Like, so at this point I was in my, like mid-20s where I was like, okay, like I'm taking school much more seriously. I'm paying for all of this, out of pocket. So, I'm literally investing in my own education. So like I have to take this seriously and I have to like at least give it a try. Yeah. And I think just the way that, the culinary like programs are structured was like, okay, like I get it because like I'm doing schoolwork, like your sit down schoolwork, but it's a smaller part of like the bigger, like education program there. Yeah. And like 80% of the time I'm like in the classroom working with my hands, like, which is definitely what I'm more engaged with. So I think like there was like, it's like the carrot in front of the donkey where you're like, come on, like you just got to get through this class. And then like you get to go and be in a kitchen for a few hours. And like, so that was kind of like a reward system, but yeah, I ended up loving it.
Oh, that's cool.
Was your first kitchen experiences back back in the day as pretty a shock to kind of be a part of, because it's pretty intense. It's pretty, I don't know, aggressive, right? With like all the banter and the shit talking and the, right? Like, how did you feel when you walked into an environment like that?
So, I mean, kind of going back to working retail, it's really not that different,
Oh,
you know,
really?
in terms of like the environment, because like there's intense pressure for you to hit certain numbers, right? Hit certain goals, the way that you interact with, you know, different groups of people. And I mean, it's hard working in sales because like a lot of people walk in with the mentality of like the customer's always right, or like I'm angry about this thing and I'm taking it out on you. So like there were some things that like I could see the similarities, and I was like, okay, like I understand this and I know how to kind of behave in this environment, and like, you know, what skill sets can I draw from my previous experiences that can, you know, be used here. And you know, like, yeah, there were certain things that I was like, what is this? Like, what's happening, right? But also, like, that's kind of the downfall of being a really young cook, is like, you don't understand, like, those things shouldn't be normalized. Like, we shouldn't allow things like that to happen. But, like, you're young. Like, you don't understand, like, this is bad behavior. So you're like, well, guess this is just what we expect, because you look around at your peers and they just put their heads down, or they're participating in like that troublesome behavior, and you're like, okay, like I guess I'm just supposed to do that too.
Yeah, it's definitely a dangerous place to come up in. So you've worked at a lot of impressive places. Which one of those kind of influenced you the most, would you say, as far as choosing the direction of, you know, like how did Snaggletooth happen? How did Paso Roto happen? You know.
So definitely, you know, Blackbird was like my first like kitchen job, like commercial kitchen job. And, you know, it definitely kind of helped shape a lot of the ways that I think about like food, but also like organizing and how to survive and thrive within a kitchen. And, you know, I learned a lot about food from David Posey, and he was, to me, like really a good mentor. But I think when I think now as where I am in my life and looking back, like when I think of mentorship, you know, so many people think about it as from places of authority. Like, who was your boss that like really helped shape and mold you into like the person that you are, into the cook that you are, into the chef that you are. And I think for me, like now that I look back on it, like 12 years later, mentorship came so much from the cooks.
Oh, interesting.
And I think like that's what we kind of always forget. Like the cooks who show you like how to cook, how to set up, how to organize, how to not get the chef to yell at you, right? Like how to do the recipe right. Like there's always like that one recipe in the book where you're like, actually don't follow the recipe the way it's written because it doesn't work that way. This is how you do it. So like write down the correct proportions or whatever it is. And I just think of like the people, you know, I think back on Blackbird fondly because of the cooks that I worked with, because we were all sort of, you know, like in a similar place in our lives or in our careers.
Right.
And just having those folks like really just like hold my hand and be like, okay, like, dude, let me show you, right? Like, let me teach you, let me whatever. And I think that more than anything else, like really helped shape the person that like I wanted to become, and that like still to this day, like I still talk to a lot of them, you know, they're still mentoring me, right? Like they're still inspiring me, like they're still showing me ways to, you know, survive and thrive within this industry.
That's very cool.
Yeah, such a good,
like,
such a good point. Yeah, definitely. I never thought of it like that. Where, because like for me, it's like Chris Pendel was like my guy. But man, now that you mentioned it, I think back on all the sous chefs and all the cooks I worked with, and how much like more I learned from them technically, and exactly how to not get yelled at by the chef. You know, like that's absolutely correct.
Was Paul not at Blackbird at all? Like, or
I think at this point, you know, he had multiple restaurants. He had Publican, he had Avec, you know, so like we would see him occasionally, but
Posey
you know,
was the guy.
Yeah, like that was the person that you saw every day.
Very cool. Was there a specific maybe after you kind of left there, when you did did decide to go on your own, like, was it, what was like the cuisine you were like, this is what I really want to cook and have my name on it? What was that?
Well, definitely Korean cuisine. And I think, like French and Italian cuisine were the cuisines that I first learned, right? Like, especially in culinary school, like that's like what they call the mother cuisine. So, like a lot of the focus was on French techniques, Italian techniques, Chinese techniques, not really as much Chinese because for a lot of reasons from that school, which we won't get into, but, like French and Italian, especially French, was like the focus. So like a lot of the things that I learned was based in French cuisine. But Korean cuisine was really how I found myself, especially like when we talked like earlier about like being estranged from family, like you kind of lose that connection with like, okay, like what does it mean to be Korean? What does it mean to be, children of immigrants, things like that. But like when you lose that, it's sort of like, like you like kind of brush that part of your life away because you're like not ready to deal with that. Yeah. Right. So it was great like to be able to come back to those parts of myself through Korean food and just being like, oh yeah, like I remember like these things are actually like really nourishing and they're really delicious and like there's so much history behind it that like it's a way to kind of, I don't know, like reconnect with those parts of myself.
Yeah. You know what's interesting also? It's like I personally, because especially same thing, I grew up not cooking Korean food, right? Especially when I started cooking. But now that Tom and I have opened Perilla and then City Arc before that, it's just like I'm learning that my mom and grandma and aunts, they were using food and techniques that now we're discovering they're good for you. And like samgyetang, so like the chicken soup.
Oh yeah.
It's like so nourishing, right? And even like when I bring, like we did 4-star mushrooms a few weeks ago, and it was like, I showed my mom lion's mane and Reiki mushrooms, and she's like, "Oh my God, like that's this stuff," and like we've been using this, and it's like has all these healing properties. So it's like, it's very like, I don't know, just it's so nice to reflect and reconnect with kind of like our upbringing. It's very interesting.
Absolutely. So Korean was kind of the mission with Pasaroto then. I have to ask you, what was Pasaroto? What did that word mean?
So in Italian, it means little sparrow, which is something like my dad. So I have like my left foot like is slightly like pigeon-toed. So like when I was little, like when he'd come home like late at night, he would like massage that foot and be like, "Oh, it's like a little sparrow's toe," and I'd be like, "Ugh." I'm still conscientious about it, so please don't look at my feet.
That's awesome. And so when you opened that restaurant in
2000,
what is time? I don't know. When was that? 2018?
2018?
17?
Maybe?
I don't know.
Right. It just was such an incredible space. I think, I could say I'm privileged enough. Like me and Andy actually both went there together for my first experience. And you were so warm and hospitable that day. It was just
that day. Thank you.
It was such an incredible dining experience. And just like everything, like when you're, I remember just like the sujebi, just like, oh my God, I totally,
the lamb ragu,
totally get this, the ragu, and then just seeing the space that you were cooking out of, that was to me was like the most. I was just like, holy shit, like kitchen small, and you were just crushing it out of that little space.
Oh, thank you.
And the patio was beautiful too.
Yeah. That meal was incredible.
It was, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was. I still remember, like there was like moments of it. I'm like, man, this is like what? I think you did a hamachi dish as well, and you did some scallops, right? Yeah, like I still remember that meal very clearly.
Yeah, that's years ago.
Yeah, that's years ago that we went there.
And I think like as a Korean American, like that it is like really meaningful, like for other like Korean Americans to be like, oh, like I fuck with this, right? Because like. Because it's really hard, like, because, like Koreans would walk into this restaurant and be like, this is not Korean food. Like, you cannot call this Korean food. And I was like, but I'm Korean. Like, I can call whatever I make Korean food because it's coming from Korean hands, right? Like, but, like, then it gets into this whole conversation around, like, authenticity and traditional, like, what does that what does that mean, right? Like, and who gets to define what that means?
Our parents.
Yeah, well, apparently, or like other Koreans, but it's like, I get it. Like, yes, this is not like what you'd see when you go into your Choseonok or your Sanjugapsan or, you know, like your other Korean restaurants within Chicago. And it's like, and yes, if you want traditional Korean food, please go there, support those people. But this is not what I'm claiming to do, right? Like, I'm not making Korean food. I'm making my Korean food. I'm making the things that like I'm doing my own storytelling about, which I don't know if y'all's ever get that at Perilla where they're like, excuse me, like, or like, this is not how my mom makes it. And I'm like, okay, then like go hit up your mom. Like, why are you coming here? Like, I don't understand.
I think I already, we had this cooler episode where I just vented for a straight hour on this topic.
This is a recurring theme right here. You just
like,
nailed
sorry
it.
to touch on a little
I'm just
tender
like,
subject.
this tick is like going
Oh
off.
no!
And I'm just
Okay,
like,
let's move on because then we don't
no.
need to rehab this conversation.
I think I'd love to just mention that, like with our restaurant, me being in the front, I get that. I remember the first year. It's that feeling in my stomach when I saw like a large group of Koreans come in. And I'm just like, oh, like, okay, are they gonna get this, right?
Yeah.
And I think it comes out of just how much we love our restaurant, that like we want them to love this, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this sickening feeling in our stomach. I'm just like, are they going to understand what we're doing here? And I try to, you know, be the messenger in the dining room that this restaurant is authentic Korean food. It is not traditional. And I try to like emphasize that line because I think it's a blurry line for a lot of people. But yeah, I just it's a soft spot for me, and I feel like, you know, nothing makes me more happy about my life when people from other culture tell me that we're not doing things right, and I just like the.
Well, at that point, you're like, okay,
patience.
thank you, and move on. Like, goodbye. Like, that's fine. Especially like food. Let's not get into the whole like food critics, like who are predominantly white men, like who come in and they're like, this isn't Korean food, and you're like, I'm sorry, are you Korean? Like, move aside, sir. Like, go sit down. Like, we don't need your opinion on that because like this isn't your experience. Like, because you had Korean food a handful of times, that does not make you the authority on anyone else's food other than your own. So
I agree.
move on.
We get that so often. Like, at this place, you know, it's for free. At this place, they give you this, you know. And
I think if I could just say anything to people that are coming to the restaurant, just come in like any restaurant, not our restaurant, every fucking restaurant. Just have an open mind and just be, you know, accepting of what they're trying to do and try to learn what they're trying to do, right? Not just like to go in there with this kind of closed mind attitude of, oh, I'm expecting this, or, you know, I think, you know, that covers that. But as far as like going into this, I wanted to touch on your trip to South Korea. It was an incredible, just like when I heard that you were taking your team over there, it's so exciting to hear that in our industry. It doesn't happen often enough. We were talking about this with Joe Froman and Chris Pendal about the opportunities that like me and Andy were able to have with traveling for work and like experiencing something through our employer, especially in this industry more than any others, because it's just not normal, right? And so I just commend you for doing what you did. What kind of impact did it have? And this is a big question here, but as a chef, but also a team leader, and also as a Korean American, what was that trip and what was the impact it had on you?
So that trip happened in January of 2020. So this was a few months before everything.
Yeah, you guys were there when it was
before the panini happened. And so
the great panini of 2020.
The big panini of 2020. So, you know, like it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's tainted with like this, like, you know, like we left for that trip and came back from that trip with like all these ideas and just like the things that we learned together. And even for myself, like being able to, like, I hadn't been back to Korea in like 18 years. Like the last time I went was when I was 17 or 18 years old. So almost a full lifetime had passed, but like since I've gone back. So for me, it was really interesting to see all the changes that had happened, and like just from like the bits and pieces of what I do remember, but also being able to go over there without family, because like I usually go with my mom or my brother or like like other family members. So this was the first trip that I took there, like as me, with my like with the work folks that I worked with, and that was like such an interesting experience because I've only ever experienced Korea like on my mom's itinerary, right? She's like, this is where we're going, this is who we're seeing. It's like mostly family. You don't really get to eat out that often because like you're eating at home, like she's like, oh, like your emo is such a good cook, like we're just gonna eat at home all the time, and it's like rice and kimchi and a fried egg, and you're like, all right, like whatever, that's
delicious
great.
by the way.
Yeah, it was just great. But like you didn't really get to see other things that you wanted to see. It was just like whatever your parents wanted you to see. So that part was really amazing, because we as a group, there was, I can't remember how many of us there were now, 9 of us all together, kind of deciding like what are the things that we want to see and like how do we kind of fit this all together. So we spent almost a full week in Seoul and then 4 days in Jeju.
Oh wow.
Awesome.
And Jeju was phenomenal. I hadn't been back there since I was like a little kid. I have like absolutely no memories of it.
Yeah.
And that was like really phenomenal. But I think being able to share that experience with other folks, especially like living in the States, it was for a lot of them like they had never like been fully immersed in Korean culture like that. So I think and a lot of them had worked at the restaurant for quite a while. So it was like a really wonderful experience for them to be like, oh, like the things that we talk about in the restaurant, like it all kind of like connects together now. And like I kind of understand where the inspiration for these things come from, but also like knowing you as a person, like I see where like these other things kind of like come into play and like interject with what we have on the menu. So that was a really wonderful experience to be able to kind of share that with people that I already share a lot of time with. So coming back, we were like just so excited. We're like, these are the things that we can like start implementing. Here are like dishes that like we were so inspired by. Here are like shared experiences that like now, when guests come in, it's like this thing that I'm showing you, like I have personal experience with this. Like this is what this means to me. And I think like having that connection, right? Like being able to have that part of themselves be presented to, guests that were coming in was, so exciting to them. And then, and then that happened. But, I still think it was a wonderful experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you eat the pork belly in Jeju?
Yeah, we had quite a
is it,
like,
is it that incredible? Like I mean,
it was great, but it's like everything that I ate there was like pretty phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, like we did a lot of research of being like, okay, like this is where we're gonna go on this day. This is the time. Like
Did you guys have a liaison over there, or did you? Oh wow, you guys did all the planning yourselves.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
Big Virgo brain over here. Just I love my organization. So.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Man, how long were you guys out there for?
2 weeks.
Oh wow, that's a long trip.
It was a long trip.
That's awesome.
We stayed in a lot of bunk beds. It was really fun. And then we all got like either the cold or the flu, just like from traveling. It was so cold over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like it was like happening in stages where like people were just like the sniffles.
Well, you got unlimited salangtang and like just delicious tongs over there to keep you good.
Yeah. True.
What was what's like a couple dishes that when you, as soon as I say Korea trip, what's like the first couple things that come to mind as far as food?
Definitely like a lot of like noodle soups. Like so, like I was kind of, but like also like Korean cuisine. I think when people think of it, they're like, oh, barbecue, right? Like it's kalbi and like bulgogi and stuff like that. But for me, like Korean food is like tang, right? Or it's soups and stews. It's just like things that are like bubbling and beautiful. So a lot of the like those dishes that we had out there were phenomenal. There's like one place that has like maybe like 10 seats, and they only serve like a pork noodle stew, and that's it. That's the only thing you can get. So like you just come in, you tell them the size, and that's what you get. And it was so phenomenal. Jeju had like phenomenal seafood, which was really great. So we just had a bunch of like he all the time. But I don't know.
Jealous.
Yeah, now I'm just
a blur.
like
we almost made it out there.
Yeah.
Shortly after
we had
you
tickets in
okay.
March, so we were
I'm
following
sorry.
right behind you guys. Daniel still has his he's fighting Seoul Airlines, Korean Airlines for his credit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started on airlines.
And I just remember Andy fighting with all the Airbnb people trying to get the refunds back.
They wouldn't give us a money back.
He's like, want me to go there and die? Is that what you want me to do? It was literally like I would open the office door and Andy's on the seats like, you want me to go to Korea and die? Do you basically want me to go to Korea and die? I was like, oh my God.
You just like close the door. You're like, never mind. Like I'll come back another time.
We'll get the specials another time, Chef. So we want to dive into what's happening right now. And this is really exciting because I think, even for the small, short interactions that we've had over the last few months, I'm still really trying to learn about what this is that you're doing. And I think it's extremely exciting. But I guess I want to know, like, what was the inspiration that really triggered the beginning? Mm-hmm. And then in that moment, what were the goals that you had at the start of all of this?
Mm-hmm. So really, Alt Economy came about around September 2020 is when we officially closed Paso Roto. And when we talk, so the mission of Alt Economy is just exploring equity through alternative economies. Mm-hmm. And alternative economies can mean a lot of different things. They're circular economies, community economies. It's called many different names. But essentially, it's community-focused economies, meaning that a lot of the time it's not recognized by the government or by the city. It's a lot of like cottage laws and, working out of your home or working out of commissary kitchens. And think of them much more as like microeconomies or micro businesses where usually it's like one or two people and they're, owning and operating a lot of these. And over the last 2 years, like it's definitely become more common to see, like pop-ups,
for sure.
Different like collaborations, things like that. But as kind of it cycles in together with the Korea trip, when we left for those 2 weeks, originally we had decided that we're gonna close for those 2 weeks because like everyone's like January's slow anyways, and like we some people wanted time off, but others were like I need to work, like I can't not work for these 2 weeks. So we're trying to figure out like a good solution during those 2 weeks so that the staff who didn't go on this trip could keep making money. And we had reached out to Saosang, which is Andy Sisambun. And he does like a Laotian pop-up.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, I think he was just doing like a couple here and there. And I was like, do you want to take over our kitchen for 2 weeks? Like all you have to do is just like pay the rent that was within those 2 weeks, just so like we can keep the lights on and everything else. But I'm like, everything else, like you get to keep. Like, let's work on something. Like you get staffing already for the most part. Like all your front of house is pretty much knows the space, knows how service goes, like understands how, like all the infrastructure is there. All you need to do is just come in, cook the food, make the drinks, things like that. So kind of looking at how that worked and being like, okay, like there's something here that could be helpful. And we were hoping that, down the line, we could turn that into something that we do pretty regularly so that like, it gives me time off, right? Like that I don't have to be there 7 days a week, but also provides structure and opportunities for other people who, want to open their own brick and mortar or, do something semi-regularly to have a space that already has all those things set up. So, like kind of taking that idea and saying like, okay, so during the pandemic, a lot of folks lost their jobs. Or they no longer feel safe working in restaurants. So what other alternatives are there? And kind of using that model to start building things that people could have an alternative to having to work in restaurants. And really as like, when you're talking about like, like understanding what is alt economy, like I don't even know myself. And like, that's kind of the joy of it is because like it should morph and change and evolve depending on like the needs of the community, the needs of, the people participating, needs of guests, like it's really a very fluid project. And really at this point, now that we're almost a year and a half into it, what people are asking for is like, okay, so like, now that the vernacular around like pop-ups and collaborations is just sort of like generally understood.
Yeah.
What is the next step? And that's sustainability. Like for people who want to keep doing this long term or turn it into something else, like what resources and tools do they need in order to turn your pop-up that you do occasionally into something that maybe you want to do regularly? Or where do they kind of get started in getting a brick and mortar if that's what they want to choose? Like how do they do e-commerce? Like how are, like there's just a lot of questions that people have. And, like some of them have never worked in restaurants. Others have worked in restaurants for a long time, but have never been given the opportunity to like look at numbers.
Yeah.
How does this restaurant work? There's a lot of gatekeeping that happens within the restaurant industry. So there's so many things that like are kept from them that they need access to. So like, how do we provide that? So now that like the holiday season's over and like, I'm done like doing a lot of like the pop-ups that I need to make rent for myself. I'm kind of focusing back on like the toolkits and resources portion. So every pop-up that I do full financial transparency.
Yeah.
From the minute like that it's conceptualized, I have a spreadsheet. Like this is how I figure out my numbers. This is how I figure out strategy. This is how I organize. Like this is how we collaborate together. Because a lot of the pop-ups I don't do on my own. Like we do it with other micro businesses because like you're trying to create that community. You're trying, like, you need each other's support. Like this is not something that you do on your own, like, and like we don't want to be ego driven. Like this is community driven. So like what does your community need? Like what are they asking for? And a lot of it is, like how do I do this? So like being able to provide some of those structures. And for the next year, we're working on like, how do you read a P&L? What does that mean? What are these line items? Like, how do you create a business plan, right? Even if like you never open a brick and mortar, it's good just to know, like, if I wanted to, or I want to just understand how this all works, like you need that language, you need those skill sets. But if you don't feel comfortable going to someone that you work for right now, or you don't have anyone that you can go to, like who are the people?
Boom. There it goes.
Goodbye.
We're just gonna keep going. I wanted to highlight that because I feel like what you guys are doing and the timing of what you guys are doing. I remember very vividly during the height of the pandemic when all the pop-ups started coming up. It was incredible to see, I guess, like if there was a big positive that came out of COVID and the pandemic, it was that nudge and that encouragement for people to be like, I'm at home, like I still love to make food, or I still love to mix drinks. Like how do I start something from this? And you saw this boom of just people and the creative out there that's like, I'm just gonna cook this out of my apartment and I'm gonna sell it on Instagram. But I felt like there's all these people that are like, cool, like I'm gonna take that first step and we're gonna do this. And then it's like, and then what? And then how do I do that? And how do I collect money on this besides Venmo? How do I avoid, I remember specifically, I think it was 9 Bar. She's the daughter
Lily Wang, sorry.
Yeah, Lily. And I was just like, I remember reaching out to her. I was like, hey, if there's anything you need, we're happy to support. And one of the things that we suggested was, because we got lucky, our friend in Oakland was like, hey, use Square. They're not charging businesses right now to use a takeout platform. And I immediately was just like, hey, like you should set up on Square. That's where we have all of our stuff done. Really pretty good rate. It's a competitive rate out there. And just you guys taking that next, kind of like taking that mantle and being this like resource for people that are like, hey, like I'm doing this thing and I guess I need help trying to figure out what to do with this. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it's important. Like that's the whole idea that you educate, right? Like that, because most cooks, right, especially like coming up, don't think necessarily or even have time to think about, how do I start a business plan? How do I understand P&Ls? How do I understand, all the financials? And like, that's something that I had to learn kind of on my own time, right? But the fact that it's incorporated into your guys's philosophy, I think that's so necessary.
Right.
You know, I love that about it.
I gotta say, it's just hearing this though. It sounds like there are some challenges, and I can feel like just having this not so structured, but having a little bit of like introducing. I feel like that can be. I imagine that might be a challenge that you have. We're like trying to be away from this like foundation of what existed. But you're like trying to like put a little bit of that structure in there, and I feel like that's maybe where
are you getting resistance?
Not resistance, but like just more challenge. Like I don't.
Yeah, I mean, like, so here's a lot of like the things that like by doing this like over the last year or so like that I've like really started to like process and like learn through is like so I have like neurodivergency. So for me, like things are either black and white, right or wrong, right? Like that's how my brain thinks. But like you have to think like on a spectrum, right? Like you have to think of things like not as on a binary, right? Like there's so many truths that can live together. And one of them is like, so when we talk about like, okay, like we're providing alternative economies, alternative futures to like what already exists, that doesn't mean like, fuck every single thing that happens in the hospitality industry, like goodbye to all the service industry whatsoever. But there are things about it that like we no longer want in the new future, right? In the new hospitality movement. So it's like, what are the things that, that worked for us, right? As workers, right? Not as like owners or leaders, like what parts of that do we want to keep and bring with us, and what parts do we want to leave behind? And like like figuring out like, okay, like it's not an all or nothing. Like we can't, that's not how we can't think of anything in that way, right? Like we have to think of things on a spectrum and say like, okay, like where do we kind of want to meet, right? And like what parts are like the things that are necessary, right? Like yes, like fuck capitalism, like, but like we're still operating under a capitalist system. So like what are the things that we can take and use to the community's advantage, right? And say like, okay, like here's the structure, here's the things that like really provide support for workers, and then what doesn't, and what needs to change about that, and like what can we do as a community and decide as a community that we want to do moving forward.
A lot to unwrap there.
That is, it's I guess I'm wondering how it's being received, both from your participants and your customers.
I mean, positive. Like, I think it's, for the most part, this is what folks want, right? Like, so I'm not just like out there being like, we're just going to do this, right? Like a lot of it is just like, it's exploration, it's experimentation. It's being like, what if we did this? Like, what do y'all think? Like, does that feel right to you? Does that feel good to you? Are we centering the right people when we make these decisions, instead of just being like, this is how we make money, this is how we do things? And, the biggest thing that a lot of us are learning is that like profit is not evil. We need to make a profit, right?
Absolutely.
Making money is not evil.
Right.
Like, again, you can't live on that binary of being like, money evil, but being broke is good. Like, it's, again, like, it's that capitalist brainwashing, right? Like, we have to say that we need to make money to live joyful lives. So what is that? And how do we do that? But the minute that you make profit from exploiting other people, that's where it becomes problematic. And that's where it's saying like, this needs to stop. And that's where within the restaurant industry is what we're seeing is saying, hey, you're exploiting people in order to turn a profit. And this is very wrong. Like, we do not want to bring this into the new hospitality movement. So how do you create a profit, take care of your employees, take care of yourself without having to exploit anyone?
Love it. Yeah, we were fortunate enough to go to your first event here in Chicago, at the Blind Barber.
Oh yeah.
And it was like just a turnout. I remember I was like, holy crap. There was a ton of love and support in that room that night. And I think what was the most exciting to see was like you guys, the cooks and chefs that were participating in it. Like, we saw Margaret and Vinod, and like they were out there in the room, like, and they were just like so happy. And it's like, I don't necessarily see that every time I walk into a restaurant. So it was just
They
such
were
a
stressed
cool.
the fuck out too.
They were, yeah. It was a lot. But it was really exciting to see that, and now you've done like 3 tours on the summer, or
Yeah, so we did like one big tour,
big
but
tour.
we hit up a couple of different cities, just kind of taking a lot of the things that we learned in Chicago and saying like, okay, like, so, you know, talking to other cities, you know, people are mentioning like, well, how do you do this? Like, where do you get started? And it's like, okay, like maybe there is a need for us to like go to these other cities and like, learn from them, right? Because like the things that we learned from like Detroit and New Orleans were, I mean, they were so big, right? Like, because they already have a really deep solidarity network there. So, you know, for us, like to see that and be immersed in it and learn from the people who are really leading that was such a wonderful experience. But also providing things that like we are good at. So like structure, organization, you know, a lot of the connections that we had working in the restaurant industry for a long time. So being able to connect with like Turkey and the Wolf, Rose's Fine Food. So like places where they already have pull and draw. And then saying like, thank you, but move aside. Because what we really want to like highlight are, you know, like BIPOC, like femme, queer, trans folks, like who are leading the movement within alternative economies. So like, let's center them, like give them what they need, which is, you know, exposure, money, you know, infrastructure that they need in order to succeed, not just at the event, but prolonging that. So that was really cool to be able to just kind of do, you know, like we just did the Midwest and the South, and then being able to bring it back into Chicago and then doing like a really big one with all the other underground economies here was really phenomenal.
That's awesome.
What are some of the other underground economies that are around Chicago?
I mean, there's a huge amount of them.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and they, you know, kind of like ebb and flow. So like some of them just want to do like in-person pop-ups. Some of them want to do like e-commerce. But some of the ones that like I really like, Limon y Sal, they're really wonderful. Pink Salt, Thatu, which you know, Funeral Potatoes, Tasting India. I mean, it's just really wonderful because it's usually like 1 or 2 people. And what they're doing is like they're interjecting their own experiences into whether it's food or art or music and being like, hey, like I'm trying to connect with you from afar, which I think, especially within the pandemic, like that is so important, right? Because like, just because we have to be physically distant, people now more than ever want emotional connection, right? They want spiritual connection. They want like to be able to feel like they know the person that they're supporting, right? Or that they're eating their food or like listening to their music. So I think, you know, these like microeconomies just provide so much more than just what you know,
selling.
the physical actual thing. I think, you know, it's so exciting to see the way that people are using like micro businesses to be able to like create communities really like I mean most of the people that I talk to at this point like regularly are people who own other like alternative economies or micro businesses, especially ones that are trying to interject and change the way that the structures have already been set up for so long.
Yeah.
We did what we did in the 2 events with
Datu,
which
they're incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
And if
They're the nicest, like they're just the nicest humans that ever
They
existed,
are.
and like they're so
wonderful.
kind.
Yeah.
the entire team at Datu is like, it's not just Margaret and Vinod, it's like the people that are part of that. And for those of you that are listening and want to hear more or learn more about Datu, you can find them on Instagram at THATTU. Is that it? Datu? Or is
Yeah,
Datu
Datu.
Chicago?
Yeah,
Okay.
THATTU.
But yeah, just we hosted 2 pop-ups for them, and like to see the support that came out, like you were there for one of those, like there was literally a line going down our window on Milwaukee for people trying to get in there and order food. So that was really, really something cool.
There's more people there for them.
Like, hey, we're like, hey, we got food too in this restaurant. If you guys,
We're a restaurant.
We're like pressed up against the window, like help, me too.
We're in here.
what would you say have been some of like your toughest learning experiences coming from this?
I mean, it's always going to be work-life balance.
Oh,
just like, because now that I work from home, I'm just like, I'm in my pajamas, but I'm just working all, because like, it's like, where else can you put like channel all of like your neuroses? It's like, oh, this thing that I fully understand, like what to do and how to do it. Yeah. So I think that's been really interesting. Obviously like mental health. Yeah. That's a huge thing because like on top of the pandemic, it's like trying to navigate everything else is just been really difficult. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also been, really good because it's like, okay, like we got time. Like we need to start addressing some of this stuff, like, because it's only going to make you, a better friend, a better person, a better partner, a better like collaborator to be able to say like, what are the things I recognize about myself that like need to change in order for me to be a better person?
Awesome.
Wow.
Very cool.
You want to talk about
what's going on right now?
Yeah. What?
This is going to be a little bit a little off topic, but we just wanted to know, just because me and Andy love eating, and we love the city of Chicago. And we just wanted to know where you. I know these are interesting times, but let's backpedal like a couple months ago,
or pre-pandemic,
or pre-pandemic.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Where do you enjoy dining out in Chicago these days?
Well, like these days, nowhere. I think the last restaurant that I ate out at was actually Perillo, and that was like when William came. And that was probably the one restaurant I went to this year.
Really?
I mean, we are taking this seriously. Like it's no joke. And like we really don't like get takeout or anything that often. But like when we do, like we try to support like other micro businesses. So whenever like people do drops, like I really love like all of the people that I mentioned earlier. Snack Cat is also a really good one, and they're really cool. And they do a drop like every couple of weeks. Mito Kaya. I love them. Also, Deanna's wonderful. Easy Does It. They have great wines.
I'm not familiar with this one. Yeah. I also need to know all these other micro businesses out there too, like Snack Cat. I didn't hear of. Yeah. But I know of the other ones that you mentioned. Okay, so awesome. Easy Does It is what? Where is this?
It's in Logan.
Okay.
I forget the street that it's on.
Is it like near Lula, like near the actual square?
Yeah, they're all kind of like around there, right? Like I think it's on
Milwaukee, probably.
Question mark. But in the summer, it's great because they have like a huge patio and like they spread everyone out, and they have really wonderful wine selection. But they are open through the winter as well. But just
is it a wine bar?
Yeah, I mean it's like a. It's just bar. But it's definitely has like a really great selection of wines, which I know you love wines.
Definitely.
Supercana is also really great.
Yes,
I love their food.
Super excited about going back there because they've been closed for a little bit, right?
Just recently, like a lot of the restaurants lately. Lula's of course a great one. Yeah. But yeah,
Supercana did that pickup window. They installed the pickup window during the pandemic. I don't know if you guys saw that.
That was the lifesaver for them.
That was incredible. Yeah, we picked up some breakfast food from them once.
Good idea.
The pickup window is game changer.
It is. Yeah. We installed one ourselves. And it was just like we were freaking out. Like we're like, how do we invite people into our dining space, but at the same time make them feel as comfortable as possible? And one of the things was like, let's avoid having a line of drivers just sitting at the door. So we're just like, we installed this window, and it's been probably one of the best things that we've ever done. Yeah. Especially when the takeout is busy as hell. So, in the country, favorite spots especially now
guys, this is a big world.
Anything that stands out. Maybe how about in the cities that you travel to, especially during this Alt Economy tour? Is there anything that stood out?
Like we really didn't go out to eat that much during the summer tour because still like it was during the pandemic. We were trying to be really careful, especially since we knew that we were traveling. We did not want to be like the harbingers of like COVID. Right. So we're like, we just like went to grocery stores and just like cooked in the hotel rooms, or just like we got like one Airbnb. But some of the places that like I can think of internationally that like I've like had really wonderful meals. Mexico City, Fonda Fina is really wonderful. Panaderia Rosetta is really good. They do like all like baked goods, and they do like lunch and dinner and stuff like that too. In Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh yeah.
There's a place called Yoshitomo Sushi, which is
That's not what I
it's
was
so good, like phenomenal.
How do you say it again?
Yoshitomo
Yoshitomo Sushi.
It's by
In
a chef
Omaha.
named David
All right.
Yoshitomo.
So all you listeners out in Omaha, you guys, all one of you,
We're big. We're big there.
you guys, yeah, we got a huge
You
following.
never
in
know.
Omaha.
Like you got to drive through Omaha to get to like the West Coast, so it's like it's a
There's
nice
some
little
Korean
like stop
kid
in.
listening to this, like, yes, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that place.
Get in the car.
Thanks, Jennifer, for shouting that out.
Hell yes.
Can I ask a question? I want to
Yes.
know more about. I'm picturing you and your chef friends cooking dinner in a hotel room.
Yes.
What was the best? What was the best hotel room meal? Like, what do you cook if you're in a hotel room?
A lot of microwave food.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, bringing
Chef
back
Mike.
the
You gotta get Chef Mike in.
microwave. Yeah,
Don't
I am the microwave
underestimate
king.
the microwave.
Yeah, like I don't know, like you can make like rice like from like actual raw
Oh.
rice in a microwave.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You got to do a post on how to do that. I think a lot of college kids would be like that. You saved their lives.
How long
Yeah.
does that take?
Like 5 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Just
We'll
change
talk
We've
about
been doing
it.
this wrong the whole time. We're like gonna
It almost comes out as good as when you like do it in a rice cooker. Almost. But like you just can't,
Yeah.
it's just quality.
Depends how Asian you are, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you just
And,
quickly
like,
walk us through this process?
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just like the water and the rice,
Is
and
it
then
the
you just
same
Or
put
you
it
do
on.
clean it?
Well, I get like what's the brand
Reed
that I use?
Bros?
Cocoa.
Oh.
Okay.
And like I get the one where it's like new crop, so like you don't really have to wash it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it even says on the bag, and I was like, thank you, because I don't want to do that one extra step, even
Yeah.
though rice water is great for your hair and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, or like the big one, baked potato, and like like you like wrap it in plastic, prick the fork, put it in there for like 3 minutes, perfect baked potato.
Oh, yeah.
Then you
What?
like slice it open, and then you put a piece of Kraft cheese in there.
This is voodoo you're talking.
Yeah, and some hot sauce. It's like
It's classic.
perfect.
Witchcraft.
Yeah.
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 3 minutes for a whole potato to go
Yeah.
from raw to cooked?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just gotta like wrap it in some sort of plastic, like prick the holes, and then
Oh, wait, hold on. So you said plastic, wrap it in plastic.
yeah, or like a Ziploc bag
Okay.
or like anything.
For some reason, I heard foil, and I was like, wait a second. Microwaves and foil are no good.
you will
I'm like-
enjoy this in heaven.
Oh man, yeah, that's got to be some interesting meals that you guys enjoyed there, because people like chefing it up, and it's like who's got the best microwave recipe. But
I mean, like there was no chefing going. It's like me with a a plastic butter knife that we got
Yeah.
at like Mariano's, and like just
yeah.
cutting, because like by that point we were just driving like 8 hours a day, so we were just like exhausted.
Yeah.
So we just come back and be like, let's eat a salad, because you literally just like buy the box, like dump the dressing and just like shake it, and that's what we would eat a lot of the time.
very cool. I got a question. If you could have a seat in any restaurant in the world, now this is your all expense paid. There's no, I got a blank check for you to enjoy dinner.
Okay.
Anywhere in the world. Where is that restaurant?
I mean, that's again like such a hard question. But I was thinking about this, and and this is like my biggest regret from the Korea trip. There's a restaurant in Seoul that does like Buddhist temple cuisine
Oh,
that I really, really, really wanted to go to, but like they were booked for like the entire year.
interesting.
So there was no way, and I was like, when am I ever gonna come back to Korea?
yeah.
I don't know. But
This is no affiliation with Cheongkwan.
No, it is.
It is her restaurant.
So
Is it?
I know what you're talking about. So there's a Buddhist temple in Korea.
yeah,
right?
is it called Parugongyeong?
Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, I just wrote down.
But Cheongkwan has some type of
Yeah, so it's like her, I don't know term, like monastery. Is that right?
Okay.
But her
her temple, maybe.
And then across it there is a 5-story facility where they have like
Yeah,
on the first
classes and
floor
stuff like that, yeah.
So they have like a store where you can buy merchandise and like all their dried stuff, and then like on the 3rd floor is the restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look it up, because I think I think it's in. I don't want to say it's inside the temple, but like it's ran and owned by monks.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
So it's all monks. So like the
Okay.
person the chef that was there is a monk, and she brought us the food and explained everything, and it was all vegan too.
Yeah.
Which was
Yeah.
incredible.
Yes.
And then they had like doenjang that was like, fresh 1 year and then 10 years. Like it was like soy sauce, same thing.
Is it always vegan temple food
Yes.
in Korea?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
And
that,
also
and that makes sense.
no hot.
No garlic, no allium.
no alliums and things like
Really?
that. Yeah, because it like
Dude, did you
makes
watch
your
Did
blood
you watch
hot.
that episode? Or?
I did. It was a long time ago, man. It was season 1, bro.
Yeah, don't Netflix shame. There's a lot to
know
watch in
what?
the
I
last
just-
year and
I-
a half. Okay,
I
like
remember watching that episode and I was just like, no allium. I'm like, fuck,
Yeah,
man.
that's like Korean cuisine,
that's my
right?
food, man.
Yeah.
But for anyone that's out there listening and doesn't know what we're talking about, on Chef's Table, season 1, episode
3, I think, right?
I think it's the first one.
Is it?
I think Chungkwan's the first episode. 1, 2, or 3. It's out there. Check it out. It's incredible. She's a monk.
Yeah.
Is that the right term? And I think she's highlighted by some serious people, including the chef of Le Bernardin,
Yeah, Eric Ripert.
Eric Ripert, who's a huge fan of her, and she's become wildly popular. We actually tried setting up a meeting with her on our trip in March, but that whole thing fell through.
The panini hat.
But that would be it, huh? That's your go-to right now.
yeah, for sure.
What's
love
specifically about it? Is it the cleanliness of the temple food, or is it just?
I think it's something that didn't have growing up, and just I think like the care and intention and thoughtfulness around the food is just like I just want to experience that,
Yeah.
right? Like just to be like, okay, like there's cooking, right? There's cooking with love, but like there's a difference in like cooking with like intentionality and cooking with thoughtfulness and just like and also like not going to say limited resources because like vegan cuisine is vast. There's so much. And like for me, like it's something that like I'm not familiar with, which makes me uncomfortable, right? Because I'm like, oh, like I don't know a lot about like how vegans like cook and like the myriad of different things that they have at their resource, that they can resource that I'm just like, I'm really unfamiliar with this. Like I don't know how to use this, what it is. So like I just like brush it off to the side.
Yeah.
But like also like I wanna know,
Yeah.
right? Like I wanna experience that because it's like also as a Korean, like Buddhist temple cuisine is a part of our history as well. So
Right.
like being able to kind of explore that and like connecting with that.
Yeah, that experience. So I was able to take a class there as well, and it was incredible. So like the monk was, she was so, I don't know, like godlike,
Graceful.
so like graceful,
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
like. And the way she showed us, and then she did a demo for us, and then we did it afterwards. And even with all my training, and she was like, "Oh my God, you know how to do this," but her version was like,
Yeah.
that doesn't look anything close to what you did. Like,
Yeah.
and she did it with such ease and grace, and it was so flavorful. Like the food was stuff we're all familiar with, but like the squash was incredibly flavorful. The rice cakes were, and we did it all and she showed us like everything is from their garden, right? And then and then they showed us their drying room, and like just nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was such a fulfilling experience, and and it's definitely part of something we grew up with. Even though my mom is very religious, and she's like, no. She's like,
Because it was like Buddhist cuisine.
yeah. She's
like Christian
Yeah,
food
just,
only.
did Jesus bless that? Then
Oh my God! It's so funny. I had that same. I watched that episode. I couldn't wait to show my mom that episode. And for those of you that don't know, my mom is one of the best chefs in the world, in my opinion.
OG Korean restaurant. Chicago. Yeah.
And she was like, the excitement she had, like her face, about her childhood memories of people that were like, I'm gonna leave and go, like that whole, like it brought her back, like memories of her childhood when like her friends were like, I'm gonna leave my family and to go do this, but she was so fascinated, I think, with not the food, because I don't think it was unfamiliar to her. It was that this was being shown on this like big budget thing, and it was like, for them, it's like, this is just weird. Like, this is just what is, right? And now it's being like celebrated, and it's being like, she's like, and I'm like trying to explain, like, this is Eric Repair, Mom. Like, this is like
whatever.
You know,
get
like,
this man out of here.
But that's a Korean lady.
yeah, exactly.
And, like, it's just funny and incredible to see that like things like biodiversity in your garden is such a norm over there, is such an understood thing, and now where it's like we're preaching this stuff and we're trying to change these things and fix these problems of monocropping and stuff like that. So it's just really cool to see that.
The Korean wave.
Yeah.
The Korean wave.
Yeah. What does your mom think about like all these kids like listening to BTS and watching K dramas and Squid Game?
You know, it's like, I think for my mom, because she's so like immersed in media culture, like she watches, like, you know, I have her on that Korean subscription that she gets to watch. No, it's like almost like a Google Chromecast, but it's like a Korean company. So she gets like Korean news, she gets Korean streaming, you know, videos. So you basically,
you're gonna have to give me the name of that. My mom would like freak out.
Yeah, I actually know the person that sets it up. Okay. But it's for her, I think it's just always been like such a normal thing. I don't really talk about BTS with her too much, but I think she's just excited she's more excited about what's happening at home in Korea. That like she understands, she's been serving customers food in Chicago, right, for 30 plus years. So she's seen it firsthand, getting somebody to try bulgogi, and then like a year later they're doing like, you know, 된장찌개, right? So she's seen that firsthand. But I think what she's most excited about is like the change that's happened in food in Korea, that it's become a respectable career path to become a chef. And I think she's really excited to see that, because she just loves this food so much. And for her to be like, it's amazing that like now it's being celebrated, like this food, and now like the nuances of Korean food and cuisine is being celebrated. And I think that's what she's most excited about.
Yeah, like when I first started, my parents would not even mention that I was cooking.
Like, it was like a shameful thing.
They were so ashamed. And now they're like, you're a chef. Tell everyone. Like,
but it's also because like you own your own business, and like to a Korean, it's like, I guess that's like things even out where like you're a cook, but like you own your own business. So like, like that's great.
How about as far as passions outside of food, just to change gears a little bit. I know art is a big part of your life. I mean, is there what else is keeping you, you know, excited and you know?
So like art, it's really funny because art is a much more recent kind of thing that like I've started to like put my hands into, just because, well, I mean, for a lot of reasons, but I think like my parents just like never really valued art, you know, as like something that like you need to do unless like it's for your college transcripts, like, oh, you're an artist, but they're like, oh, you're not that good at it. So like, let's just do piano instead. So it's been really interesting to kind of discover like that I actually really enjoy like drawing and painting and like doing mixed media. Floral is another one that I'm like, oh, like I actually really like this, and like there's something about that like really I respond to. But other than that, like
arrangements or
like, and mostly like dried arrangements. Like that's like really exciting to me.
Hey, we have this bouquet in our restaurant. And
is it just dead or is it dried? Like, there's a difference. Okay,
I guess it depends who you are, how you look at it. For me, I like you know, one of our staff. She's done such an incredible job of propagating all these beautiful plants, like and like I feel like Perilla's looks better than it's ever looked, because there's like all this greenery and there's life inside our restaurant. And our restaurant space, if you haven't been there, is just so like brick and metal and glass, and it's very urban, and it's all of that greenery just like really softens the room up for me, and I love it. And then Andy comes in one day with this bouquet of dead flowers. It's dried, but it's like, to me, I'm just like, oh, we're gonna put that there. Okay. Like, I'm just like, I see all this life, and then I see this death in this vase.
It's a cycle. Like, you need to see all of it, right? Like,
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. It's different if you're like, oh, here's a bouquet from like 3 weeks ago and it died in the vase and now I'm just bringing it. It's like, maybe not the right place for it. But
I specifically, so I got them for my mom.
Okay.
And then I said, don't throw these away and dry them so I can take them to the restaurant.
Yeah. They're there. You have to find it, but it's above my wine cooler in this dark space of the restaurant. That's where I have it.
Thomas.
And he's like, nah, it's gonna go. Just tuck it away over there.
How is your response to this whole Korean wave thing? Because I think it's quite interesting to see.
I mean, it is exciting, right? Especially like when I think of like my younger self and like how being Korean was like such like a, it almost like ostracizes you. And like now seeing people being like, oh, yeah, I'm with this, right? Like I'm into this, and you're like, okay, cool. And this is especially great for like younger generation of Korean Americans, where it's like, hey, your culture's cool. Yeah. I fuck with that, right? Yeah. But also it like falls into like the whole like consumerism of culture, where it's like I don't know, it just what you see on television and the way that people consume Korean media, the snippets, small snippets of what they understand as Korean culture. And it kind of almost becomes stereotyped, right? But then not seeing that in other aspects where it's like, okay, where the fuck were you when like, Asian folks are getting knocked, like attacked on the street. So like, you're fine with like consuming that, like consuming my culture, consuming like Korean like media, but like you're not showing up for like actual they're actual people. BTS isn't they're actual people, but like, you know what I mean, like just like the community of like Asian Americans around you, right? Like so it's just like sometimes, and that's just like me being the pessimist, because like ultimately like it's great, like it's wonderful to be able to see representation of people who speak your language or who look like you, and it's great when I see like my nieces who are all under the age of 18, being able to like talk about that like Korean culture with their friends, right? Who aren't Korean. And it like does evoke a lot more conversations, and them being proud, right? Of being Korean.
Oh yeah. It's very, very different than when we grew up.
Oh yeah.
Like we couldn't bring mandu to lunch, like, because it stank, it has whatever radish smells to it.
Now it's the most popular dish.
Yeah, now it's can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
We run out.
Did you watch Squid Game?
I did.
Okay. I mean, would love to hear your thoughts on it.
It was entertaining. Like it was good. Like I'm with it. Like I almost like didn't want to, because I'm like, like it's just like it became like this memeable thing where I'm like, I remember like I was like scrolling through Instagram and like, what the fuck is this thing that I keep seeing on my feed, and like people are talking about it. I'm like, I just want like, now more than anything I'm just curious. But like great messaging, right? It was very anti-capitalist, so like we're all about that here. But it's really great to see a lot of like that messaging, especially within like Korean media. Like when we look at like Parasite, right, which was like another hugely popular Korean movie that came out, and like being able to have those conversations, I think that's what's most exciting, especially with like other Korean folks, like having that conversation with my parents, using that as the medium to be like, hey, like, what did you think about this, right? Like, because like otherwise, like those conversations can be really hard to have with, older generations.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys talk about Korean movies and stuff with your parents quite often? Like it was a thing with me and my mom. Like I would go and watch a movie with her like regularly every now and then we would like talk about it.
Oh, cute. I love it.
Tom has a very unique, I think, relationship. Like, because let's start from the beginning. Like, she's supportive.
Yeah. We're just doing a checklist of like good moms. I love it.
No, she's incredible. I mean, my mom is too. I love your mom.
No, I feel very fortunate. I think the unfortunate reality with most of us as children of immigrants is that there is a unrealistic pressure that's been put on us from a young age. And not to say that I haven't dealt with those pressures of and the challenges that we had, especially a single mom raising two boys. We had our own set of challenges aside. And I think it created this sense of this unit into my family, because there was struggle, like to keep the lights on and stuff like that. But I think because of those experiences, and I'm talking like some heavy stuff, like, you know, sheriff's departments at the door, like evicting us and things like that. As kids, it's like, because we went through that, I think as we got older, it was like you were just cheerleading for each other all the time, right? And no matter how far we strayed aside from getting shit done or partying too much and things like that, it was always like, all right, cool, let's wrangle this back and let's remember, like, we gotta figure this out together. And I think because of that, my mom's been the biggest cheerleader of mine from job to job, and I'm you know, clearing tables and, you know, doing all that shit, and she's just been incredible. So this has been it's been interesting to say the least. But yeah, me and her talk culture quite a bit. You know, we'll like watch a movie, and every once in a while I tell Andy there's like these very difficult scenes that come out because it's like some of these movies in Korea there's just a lot of nudity and stuff, and I'm just like, fuck, this is super awkward. just like on my phone. But yeah, I just think the Squid Game thing has been wildly accepted. And I love that you touched on that. Was like the messaging of the show, right? And the timing of that. Because I feel like there's been all these other Korean movies growing up that I thought were incredible. But man, if it was like Chingu that made it on that like worldwide platform, it sent a different message about who we are in our culture. So I thought it was really cool. And it's been interesting to hear people's take on Squid Game. Like, Chuck, what did you watch?
I did. You're the one that got me to watch it, and and it was like right before it blew up, you know. Because I think like sometimes like you said, you open up Instagram, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
If it gets past that, there's a certain point where I'm like, I'm not doing it. Like I just watched Tiger King like yesterday. Like I was finally like, you know what? All right. But like when it got so big, I was like, I'm not playing. You know what I mean? This is Nickelback. I'm not fucking with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I thought it was cool. Like I don't know. I didn't. It didn't seem like. Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty addictive. I got kind of bored towards the end for some reason. I was just kind of like, I don't know. I have like a limited patience for seeing people get maimed.
Yeah.
True.
So at some point I got like a little kind of bored with that, but I finished it up and I liked it. And when they put out a sequel, inevitably, I'm sure I'll watch it. You know.
Awesome. Let's jump into what's happening with you in the future here. What's in store for you in the years to come?
What is the question?
These are really big questions.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think like, you know, it's like kind of one of like the good things that have come out of the pandemic is like, I'm usually a planner. Like I plan everything, like, and I have backup plans to the plans because like I have anxiety. Like I need to know everything and like every outcome that could possibly happen. But I think like the pandemic has shown like you're just like, I'm wasting my time, not wasting my time by doing that, but it's just like there's other things that you can be focused on, and it like pulls your presence away from just concentrating on like what's in front of you, you know, and being like, okay, like what can you affect today? You know, what can you affect tomorrow? But like, why are you worrying about like what's going to happen in 5 years? Like, who knows? Like 5 years ago, I didn't think this is where we would be, right? Like, so it's like, you know, like just being so fixated on goals sometimes like really pulls you away from like what matters now, you know? And I kind of like that. I kind of like not really having a plan and just saying like, okay, like here are some things that would make me happy right now. You know, like here are the things that like bring me joy right now. So I'm going to like go pursue those. Right. And like, if that so happens to be like, oh, like I think I want to do this for a prolonged period of time, like great. But also like I'm going to be okay if those plans change and I have to go do something else or figure something else out. Like that's fine. Like it's totally okay, you know? And I think that's especially hard in this industry because like our identities are so interlinked with what we do that like it's really hard to be like, okay, yeah, like I like doing this for money. Like this is cool and it like supports me, but also like I need to have other things outside of my job as like a chef or an owner or a cook or a server or a bartender to like be like something else, right? Like, cause once you start tying your entire identity with like what you do, what happens when you lose that? And that was something like that I struggled with a lot during the pandemic was like, this is what I've known for the last decade of my life. And like, I put everything into it, like all my eggs in that basket. So like now when I don't have that, it's like, oh shit, like what is this then? You know, so, you know, I like having like goals in terms of like very short term of like, okay. And really they're very broad. It's like, I want to live a happy life. I want to live a joyful life. Like, I want to be with friends. I want to be with my family. Other than that, like, whatever.
I love
it. Great goals.
Thanks. Simple and broad, like, because I fixate too much on like the details of like, how do we get there? Like, what are the things that we need to do? And it's like, what am I doing here? Like,
over planning.
Yeah.
It's just
I kind of feel like sometimes that I had that same kind of presence come, you know, those first like 3 or 4 months of everything. There was this like weird focus on self and pause of things.
Yeah.
And also like, work kind of stopping for a while was definitely weird because I wrap my worth in that, you know, for sure.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about it lately. Like, I feel like I'm creeping back the other direction, you know, as I find myself, like we were talking about, as I find myself in the car being like, God damn it, or just like whatever. I feel like as it creeps back, I'm like creeping back to my old ways, and I want to like find a way to.
Yeah, because it's like a comfortable pair of shoes, right? It's like they're falling apart, but you're like, but I like these shoes. Like this is what I'm always used to wearing.
Yeah.
And when you wear like a new pair of shoes, you're like, these hurt. I don't like them. They're not breaking in fast enough, and it's just like, you got to break those shoes in, man. Like throw away the old pair, like, you know, or put them on a shelf and look at them. But like, you don't have to keep putting them on.
Yeah, that's the truth.
I mean, I feel like we dived into this right now, but I mean, if there was any advice that you would want to share to anyone out there, whether they're a young starting up micro business or they're a young female in this industry, or you know, what kind of advice would you share?
I mean, this is advice I'm still taking, but like your existence doesn't have to have a purpose, right? Like I think we're very like obsessed with that idea of like, I'm born and what is my purpose here, right? Like your purpose is to exist, right? Like your purpose is to find joy, is to, you know, like connect with people. Like we put so much emphasis on like, you know, graduating from college, getting a good job, like getting married, like having kids. Like these are things that like we're taught at a young age, like this is what we need to have in order to have a purposeful life. And like, you don't have to. Like if those things make you happy, 100% go out and get them. But like also like that doesn't make your life worth living or give your existence any, like, I don't know, like it doesn't make you more valuable, right? Like your purpose is to exist, like literally it is. So like I think like this industry has such a good way of brainwashing you to think that this industry is everything, right? Like it becomes so much of your personality that like you cannot untether yourself as a human being, as like a really complex, multidimensional human being, as anything other than like this thing. And like you start taking on the personality of an industry that like, let's be honest, like not a cute personality, right? Like, you know, and I think like just, yeah, your identity isn't your job. Your job is not your identity. And like what we do does not solely define you. And like that's something that's really hard to keep in mind as you like work through this industry, because like, I mean, I'm still contending with this, right? To like understand like, who am I as a person, not as a chef, not as a cook, not as an owner, not as anything else other than myself. And like, what happens if, let's say I left this industry altogether? Like, who am I then, right? Like, am I just going to find another job that like placates that, you know, like that empty slot? Like, I don't want that to happen, because like, I don't want to just keep tethering my identity to a thing that I do. Like it should really definitely be like, I am this person. I also enjoy doing this, but I also enjoy doing this, right? Like, and this is what I do to make money. And like, I may or may not enjoy that, but like, that shouldn't be your purpose.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially in those formative years, right? Like, you know, whether it's your parents or societal or even where you're working. So yeah, I think it's very important. Just like you, like we wear a lot of hats, right? I don't just cook, right? And you don't just do front of house things.
Like very general. Those things.
That's it.
Those things, right? Like, no, seriously, like, and I enjoy, you know, dabbling in other things and learning other things and, you know, things I'm not good at, like art, right?
Yeah.
Like I enjoy painting once in a while, and no one sees them.
Yeah, you don't have to be good at something to enjoy it, right?
Exactly,
Like I know social media will have you thinking otherwise, because like now we have to monetize everything. Hobbies, no such thing as hobbies. Like you need to make money at anything that you do, and like no, you don't.
Yeah.
I love
The
that.
side hustle.
Yeah.
I know you already mentioned a few shout outs throughout the show, but is there anything else, anyone else you want to kind of plug in or tell us about what's going on in your next steps with Alt Economy?
Yeah, I mean, one big shout out to my partner, Philip. I mean, they've been the most supportive, wonderful person, not just through the pandemic, but I mean, we've been together for quite a while. And I feel like, without that support, like this would have been so much harder, especially like during the transitional periods of like understanding what I'm trying, like what am I doing, right? So it's really great to have a partner who, just sometimes like all they do is just listen, and like that's like everything. I have 2 little dogs that are my entire life. So shout out to them.
What are their names?
What kind of dog?
Buster and Jackie. Buster, they're both just
Dogs?
we don't know. Yeah, like they were rescued, so we're like, I don't know, like you're cute, like that's all that matters. And also to like every like micro business, underground economy, alternative economy, like even small businesses that past, present, future. I feel like this last year and change has just been like explosively creative for me because of those people, like being able to just be like, oh, like I'm not on an island by myself, like, which is how I've operated businesses for so long, because like you are the decision maker, right? Like as an owner, like you are the person who has to make those choices, like who has to determine, and be responsible for a lot of other human beings. So it's really hard because you feel like this is on me.
Yeah.
But like it's not. Like it really isn't. Like there's an entire community of people who are like, hey, like we're all here to like figure out what this is together. Right. And I think like that is more than anything, like for me, like that community that has been built through like alternative economies has been like just the absolutely most supportive, and has given me like just opened my brain up. Like I was like, I thought I knew about business. Like I thought I understood, and like, I'm not gonna lie, like shout out to myself. Like I'm really good operator. Like I really am. Like I understand business, but not in this way. Like this has been like, just like my brain is like exploded wide open, and just being like, oh my God, the possibilities, the alternative futures that like can come from this, like is just so vast and so exciting. And I think for me, like that's because of the people. Yeah,
that's incredible. If you guys want to learn more, you can find more information at alteconomychicago.com, or you can email them at alteconomychicago@gmail.com, and find them on Instagram at alteconomy. You can help and support their work. You can find out how exactly on their Instagram. And believe me, every little bit counts. Please contribute to this incredible movement. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time and your insights. You are a trailblazer and inspiration to the current and future generations to come. And we appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you both for spending time.
Absolutely. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Kim. One thing before we wrap up, we do have a parting gift here for you.
Oh my gosh. Is it that bottle of wine that I've
been
looking at for the last hour? How did you know? Oh, Tom, just take off the
Oh my God.
Just as a token of our appreciation,
thank you.
This is a bottle of. So this is an interesting label. It's Hollyhock Lodge No. 9. The wine is the whole premise is that the producer wants to make like Beaujolais Cru, but in California. Okay. So it's incredible, and it does come from our distributor VineJoy, which I'm sure you're familiar with here in Chicago. So big shout out to VineJoy, and thank you once again.
Hell yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, that's part one.